the very first time I came to India, that's when I had this deja vu of being back in Nazi Germany. Things had gotten very bad in the city in western part of Germany, in Cologne. And the Hitler Jugend were always waiting for us to beat us up. And so my parents sent me off to relations in Poland.
And you were how old?
9. They put me into a first-class compartment.
Okay.
And in walks this very high officer in the Gestapo and the SS. So he was going to the Polish border, and that was about 3.5 hours away, something like that. I mean, I saw all this, you know, I'm seeing all this. And of course, I'm scared out of my wits and I want to get out of there. And he just sort of barks at me. Sitzen, sit. He said to me, there's not going to be any Moses this time. He says, you have to be the Moses. You be the Moses. You're going the wrong direction. He says, when you get to where you're going in Poland, you write to your parents and tell them to get out of Germany. And then he left, again, with Heil Hitler's. There it was, and it saved our lives.
So shortly thereafter, you were on your way out of Germany. Shortly thereafter,
yeah.
Poland was invaded. The war was started in earnest.
War started. I mentioned that we had to get out of there as fast as we could. We got on one of the last trains that was we still buy a ticket and and get out.
Listen to Al Drucker relate how decades later he came to know the role Sri Sathya Sai Baba played in this drama that saved the lives of Al and his family from the Holocaust. At the age of 85, Al Drucker is one of a kind. Sai Baba University professor, atomic physicist, healer, Holocaust survivor. Welcome to Souljourns, and to part 4 of this man's incredible spiritual journey. This interview was recorded in Seagrove, Florida, on March 13th, 2013.
Swami, like for instance, Swami comes up to me and says, who are you?
Uh-huh.
This is not in darshan, this is inside the house. He asked me, who are you? I said, I am Baba. You are Baba? Yes, Swami. I am one with Sai Baba. He said, very good, very good. And he gives me a little tap on the shoulder. He says, now you go out and give darshan. I think I must have told that before.
It's a great story. And I wanted to ask you the first time I heard it, if you ever took him up on that. Did you go out and give darshan?
Of course not. And another one he asks me is, what do you want? Mm-hmm. I think you might have heard that one
Well,
too.
These are standard questions that he seems to have asked 1,000 times.
And I said, Swami, nothing. I want nothing. Which was true. I didn't have any wants and no desire. And that didn't satisfy him. And he said, what do you want? I said, Swami, I'm very happy. I'm contented. Santushta, everything is fine. No wants, nothing. He said, what do you want? Swamiji, all I want is you. That's not nothing. That's everything. That's, and then he gives a long list. That's health, wealth, Santrupti, I can't remember all the words he used, He said, and he points out to the bazaar, and he says, that's nothing. That's nothing. This is everything. Everything.
You've been around him for many years. You're 85 years old. You've heard a few things. You've learned a few lessons over the years. What if somebody were to seriously, as I'm going to try right now, ask you the same questions? Who are you, Al?
I've answered this before on your
I know,
thing.
but it's a different
And
day.
it's exactly the same
day.
answer. It's Sat, Chit, Ananda. And then there's a Nama and Rupa. There's a name and a form. But it is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, pure being. Chit, total consciousness. Ananda, that eternal delight of being, that love that knows no bounds.
So
That's who I am, but that's not necessarily who I feel like I am. I feel like I'm this guy sitting here in this body, and I know that that is also Satchit Ananda, and it has a particular name, and it has a particular form, and that everything I could ever think of, everything that could ever be, everything that has any meaning, or anything that is spoken of that has no meaning, everything is just Satchit Ananda and name and form, Nama and Rupa. And that's all there ever is. And if you could remember that, to me that's the sadhana. That is really the only sadhana that's ever required. The world, all right, let me say something. When I came in, the very first time I came to India, that's when I had this deja vu of being back in Nazi Germany. It was Mahashivaratri and huge numbers of people, and I was still sort of jet lagging, and everything reminded me of Nazi Germany. Including the workers' worship, and India will lead the world, heute Deutschland, morgen die Welt. And then there's this SS on the Swami's chair, reminding me of this SS, this Gestapo colonel.
Nazi symbol.
Nazi symbol, the swastika. Everything reminded me of that. And this man who saved my life, saved our whole family. And he's an SS officer, not only an SS officer, but the head SS officer, of that area.
I'm sure by my count, you've probably told the SS story many, many times.
I did tell it many times, yeah.
But not on camera as far as I know.
Or just to tell that.
Can you tell it briefly, since you've met, I think Baba just pushed you into that story.
Just now.
So many people individually have heard it, but I've looked, I can't find it anywhere on video, and I want to preserve it so that others can delight in it. Take it back, and again, you've got a limited amount of time, you've got 28 minutes.
That I can tell very quickly.
Are you up to the challenge?
Oh, sure, of course.
Back to your childhood in Nazi Germany on the way to Poland.
Yeah. Things had gotten very bad in the city in western part of Germany, in Cologne am Rhein. And our school had been closed. And the Hitlerjugend were always waiting for us to beat us up, and some kids got hurt very badly. One boy died. So my parents sent me off to relations in Poland.
Okay. And you were how old?
9.
Okay.
9, but a fairly bright 9. I remember many things from that time.
I think this was 38 or 1938.
1938. I remembered this like one night. We lived on the ground, on the first floor, what they call first floor, which is not the ground floor, but one up in Germany. And it was an apartment building. And we had a front door to the apartment, and then there was a back door from the kitchen side. And one night there was heavy banging on the door that closed to the whole apartment complex, the major door on the outside. And then so it woke me up, and I was looking out that back door, and 4 guys not in uniform, broke into the place. They literally broke the lock and broke in, and went right past me looking through the door. I'd opened a little bit, and they pulled somebody out of bed up above, and threw him down a Jewish man, threw him down the steps, and he was just a bloody mess as it was coming down. They just kept kicking him down the steps, and then they just dragged him off in their car. And I just remember things like that. And I also remembered after the Anschluss, as it was called, that's when the Nazis occupied Austria. This man came to our Seder, our Passover Seder. It was a week earlier that the Nazis had walked into Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was at that time. And my father found him at at our temple in Köln, and brought him home for the Seder. And I just remember the terror in that man's eyes, you know, having escaped from there. So there were a lot of things that I was aware of,
Mm-hmm.
and then they sent me off to Poland. And in Berlin, I had some relatives, an aunt and an uncle, and the uncle was not Jewish, and he was fairly highly positioned in Berlin, and so they had quite a bit of money, and they put me after spending the better part of a week with them in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
They put me into a first-class compartment.
Okay.
And I was in there alone, and Jews were not permitted to be in a first class. But they apparently didn't think much of it one way or the other, and so it was very nice for me as a little kid, you know, in there, very comfortable. And then outside of Berlin, in Potsdam, which is a sort of a far suburb of Berlin,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 30 miles out, whatever. The train stopped, and all these military got on board, and a brown uniformed man opened the door to my compartment and stuck his head in for a moment, just looking around, and Heil Hitler, you know, and then he stepped back, and in walks this very high officer in the Gestapo and the SS, which is the military
Mm-hmm.
arm of the Gestapo. They're the only ones that wear uniforms. The Gestapo, for the most part, are like detectives,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but that's the Gestapo stands for the German secret police. And they're the ones that were eventually responsible for killing 6 million Jews, and God knows how many other millions of Russians and Poles and others. And so this was a colonel, an oberst in the SS.
He's about to join you in your train car, which you're the only occupant of it.
I'm the only occupant. And he is dressed he's a Prussian, and so he's wearing a monocle. They all wear their monocles, these Prussian officers. And he's got this, he's in black uniform with these high boots, and the swastika, red swastika. Well, the swastika is in black, but the armband is red on this black uniform. He was wearing white gloves, and he had a pistol on one side, sort of a leather belt across his chest, and pistol here, and on the other side was a little dagger that a black holster, a dagger about this long, I'd say about a foot long, and on the outside in silver is engraved Blut und Ehre, blood and honor. I mean, I saw all this, I'm seeing all this, and of course I'm scared out of my wits, and I want to get out of there. And I pick up my little suitcase, my valise, to get out, and he just sort of barks at me. Sitzen, sit, sit at attention, and so
Sure.
like that. And then he comes in and takes off his holster and all his paraphernalia. He takes out his monocle and takes off his white gloves and opens up his jacket thing that they have, and takes off his cap that has the silver skull on it, black cap
Must have
with
scared
some
you all
red
by itself,
piping around it, and then this silver, I think it was red, and the skull. Like I said, he sort of looked like an angel of death.
Yeah.
And
Fits the picture.
scared.
For a 9-year-old kid sitting there?
Oh my God!
Jewish?
Yeah.
Nazi Gestapo
I didn't know what he was going to do. You could, he certainly could shoot me or.
And this is
do
real
anything.
close to the buildup of the war. They had already occupied Austria, but soon to push over Poland.
Yeah, and he was going to the Polish border to organize the eventual buildup of military forces to attack Poland. I mean, it was obvious.
Yeah.
That's what his role was. And so he was going to the Polish border, and that was about 3.5 hours away, something like that, on the train. And so he made himself comfortable, and then he looks around, and he sees this kid sitting there, stiff at attention and terror, and he says, relax, I know bist ein Jude, you're a Jew, I know you're a Jew, but don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm not going to harm you. And then to entertain himself, he talks to this kid. I mean, that's how I saw it, he's talking. And he says, do you know your Bible? My Bible. So I guess he meant the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. And I didn't know what to say, I don't want to say the wrong thing. He says, come on, talk. And I said, Jawohl, mein Herr, yes, sir. And he says, no, you don't know it. Let me tell you. And I figured now I'm going to get this Nazi screed, but when he starts talking, he tells me all these different stories of the great characters of the Bible. And he first talks about Abraham and the angels, and then Isaac, who well, I forget even what the story is of Isaac, but there's a story around him. His mother was 95 or something. Sarah, Abraham's wife, was, and she had this child, and it was Isaac.
So this Gestapo colonel knows these stories.
These stories and the details of it, and he told it so well. I mean, he really knew those stories. He was a great storyteller. Or maybe he taught this at some time. I had no idea. And then he talks about Jacob, and Jacob went to find his wife, and then he got the wrong wife, and all these details of these stories. And he clearly knew a heck of a lot more than I knew about those stories. And then David and Saul. And David's friend, I forget even his name now, Saul's son. Saul was the king, the first king of Israel.
So you're becoming a little less nervous as you're sitting there?
Oh, very much. I began to enjoy these stories, and as he was telling them, and he obviously wanted an appreciative audience, and he got it. I was with him on it. And Daniel, and Moses. Then it was Moses. So 3 hours went by, and at the end of the 3 hours, it was getting close to the Polish border. He said to me, "There's not going to be any Moses this time." He says, "You have to be the Moses. You be the Moses. You're going the wrong direction. This is not going to. This is not the way you want to go." He says, when you get to where you're going in Poland, you write to your parents and tell them to get out of Germany. Tell them to not stop in Belgium or Holland or France or even England. He said, go far, go to South America, go to North America, or go to Australia or New Zealand or to Asia. But get out of Germany. Things were going to get very, very bad, and you have to be the Moses that leads them out.
Wow.
And then his adjutant. We were getting close to Posen, which was the German city on the border in those days. That's changed since then. Stuck his head through the door. Heil Hitler, sir. We're approaching the border, and he started putting himself all back together again. And then when he was all ready, he opened the door, and the adjutant came in and took his attaché case that he had. And and then with his non-monocled eye, you know, he's got a monocle here, and his non-monocled eye gives me a little wink, not a full wink, but a little wink. But he could, I could see it was directed at me. And he said, "Don't forget what I told you. Do not forget." And the last, and then he left again with Heil Hitlers, and the last thing I see is this SS on his lapel, you know, and these lightning strokes that they use to make the S. And I had, well, when I got to Poland, I immediately told my relations there and needed to write a letter to my.
So you took him seriously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I had to write to my father, and I couldn't write in German. I mean, I spoke German and had gone to school in Germany 4 years, and I write it and read it, you know, fairly well as a 9-year-old. But they open all letters to Jews, and you know, there's I can't disclose what happened there. But in my language in Poland was Yiddish, which is a kind of German. It's sort of an ancient German, you know, and with a lot of Hebrew words and other kinds of words, and sort of, it's a lovely language. It's too bad it's out of style. It's not spoken any place anymore, but it's just a neat language. You can't really say anything bad in Yiddish, and you know, they got lots of great. There's a lot of humor in Yiddish. Anyway, so Yiddish is kind of like German, but you write it with the Hebrew alphabet, and I knew the German censors would certainly not know Hebrew alphabet, and so I wrote this letter using the Yiddish writing, and I stayed in Poland at that time several months. I forget how long exactly, but when I came back to Cologne, my older brother picked me up at the train station in his bicycle, and I sat in the back of the bicycle, and when we got to our place there, the mailman was just coming in to put the mail into the box. He saw me, and I asked anything for Drucker, you know, and he handed me a bunch of letters. And right on top was a letter from the U.S. consulate in Stuttgart, which would be the nearest consulate city in South Germany, and that was our visas. So my father had applied for visas, and there it was, and it saved our lives.
So shortly thereafter, you were on your way out of Germany. Shortly thereafter, Poland was invaded. The war was started in earnest.
War started. I mentioned that we had to get out of there as fast as we could. We got on one of the last trains that was where you still buy a ticket and, you know, and get out.
And shortly thereafter, the name of every Jew was numbered and put on a list.
And as it was already, we had I had an uncle that was who had a Polish passport, and they just put him on the Polish border. The Poles wouldn't let them in, the Germans wouldn't let them in, and so they had to sit on the border. There was a 50-foot place, and I mean, all kinds of stories. So many things happened. We were very fortunate to be saved. My older brother, who was 6 years older than I was, he the day before we were to leave, he got very sick and went off on his bicycle to the doctor, and the doctor put him in the hospital, and he had acute appendicitis, and we had to leave him behind. And you're just thinking of my parents, to leave a son behind. Sure, you know, there are three of us, three siblings, and for months we didn't hear from him. We didn't know if he was alive or dead. And then he came out through, I think he came out through Switzerland, but he got out.
He got out. Two questions, real quick. What was it about your mom and dad that put such overwhelming confidence in the letter, in the message you had sent them? Their 9-year-old, 10-year-old son, maybe by this time, had sent them from Poland that they would take this action.
It was just the word Gestapo. I mean, we knew what was happening. The concentration camps in Germany, there were concentration camps all over Germany already at that time. This is before Poland. Word got back. Those who managed to get out of a camp and told what it was like and the deaths in the camps. We all knew what was happening. And so when I mentioned this is a Gestapo, and I did tell the story, they didn't think twice.
And it was years, decades later, before you were to even hear the name or see the face or the form of Sathya Sai Baba, S.S. Baba.
Yeah.
Is it too much of a leap for a guy like me, a journalist who's always looking for a connection, to even suggest that it was fate, it was destiny, it was the universe, it was the divine, it was Sai Baba?
Well, there was at that point there was no longer any question in my mind that it was Baba. Particularly when I told the story of meeting this little man and being put in a room.
Yes.
He was my roommate now. A little man who looked like he was a villager. He was so poor. The articles he had were just very simple things off in one corner, and he would sweep the floor inside and outside.
And we only have a few minutes left, and I want to catch the viewers up a little bit on this. This is on your first visit to Sai Baba's ashram, your first apartment, your first flat that you were assigned to. Your first and only roommate was this older gent from India.
And he obviously had, the clothes he had on were very poorly fashioned, you might say. It turns out later that he had himself woven the cloth.
And you didn't even know he spoke English until days later.
I didn't know any of that until on the third day. He pipes up and says, I'm going down to Darshan, and he says, excuse me, brother, but Baba is in Anantapur today giving darshan to the college girls in Anantapur, and he won't be giving darshan until this afternoon. I said, you speak English? What perfect English, my heavens, you have to tell me your story. And then he tells me his story, and he tells me how the first time he met Baba is when Baba called him. He was at that time already a minister in the central government. He had gone to England, and during the war he was in England under the auspices of the Mahatma Gandhi Foundation, where he had been brought up in that ashram, Gandhi's ashram, when his parents, who were members of the Congress Party, had been machine gunned and killed by in a major massacre.
So he had all this
Punjab.
background. Yeah. Huh? He had all this background. Now he's in England during the war,
and he becomes he gets a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics, which is a university in London, and he comes back and becomes a minister in Nehru's government, the first government after 1948, when India became independent. India and Pakistan, split. That was all part of the British Raj. Yeah, and so he then told the story. 5 seconds or
5 minutes?
Or 5 minutes. He tells the story of visiting in Madras. He's from the central government in Delhi. He comes down to Madras as a minister to on some business, and he's in this convoy of official cars. He's in a limousine. They picked him up. The governor of the state and the chief minister of the state were sitting next to him in that thing, and a Sevadal comes to his side of the car and knocks on his window, and he and asked him and gave his name, and are you that man? Yes. Sai Baba is sending for you. Sai Baba? Who? Oh yes, the guru that's come from somewhere nearby. He's in Madras. Yes, he is now asking for you. He knows me like that, and he goes there, and then he's still totally befuddled by why Baba would send for him. And you've known me? I've known you all your life. And this man was actually older than Baba was in age, in years. And Baba said, "Do you remember the air raid warden?" And apparently this man's life, when he was in London during the Blitz, he chose one night not to, after the sirens had gone off, not to go into the shelter, but stay in his little room, the garret room on top of a slum apartment house, and just pull the blinds down and get some sleep. He was trying to do his dissertation and keep some, and he had jobs to do. So he, this air raid warden, this helmeted guy with big red-faced Englishman, he said, came up to his place and pulled him out of bed and took him down into the shelter. And as soon as he was in the shelter and the man closed the doors from the big steel doors from the outside, there was this huge explosion. And when they finally got out a couple of days later, when they were dug out, just the remains of the first 3 stories of this 7-story building were left. He was up on the 7th floor. And they had been hit by a direct bomb. And so
he would have been killed.
He would have been killed, but clearly the give me another few seconds here.
You got 3 minutes.
Clearly the air raid warden must have been killed, because he was immediately outside the doors when this big explosion happened, and it was just a big heap of rubble when they got out. Baba says, I was the air raid warden.
So here we are in India.
I saved your life then.
Baba sends a Sevadar, an usher, a volunteer, to rap on his window. He's a big higher up,
and of course all the higher ups all go with him.
Are you such and such? Sri Sathya Sai Baba wants to see you, and don't you remember me?
Yeah,
I'm the. That's what he said.
Exactly.
So this is a perfect way to end this.
So you have to also understand that Baba at that time was 13 years old, and he had just actually announced his...
So the timelessness of Sri Sathya Sai Baba means
no
nothing.
relation.
There's no relation. Which leads me to my final thought, for which you have exactly a minute. In 1938, in 1939, Baba would have been very young. He wouldn't have been this SS
Well, he was
officer.
2 years older than I was, and so
you were 9.
I became 10, and he would have been 12.
He surely wasn't this august 6.
But that doesn't stop the divines.
So putting 2 and 2 together.
In fact, I'll just say, I know I have no time, but Swami actually came to visit our place at Esalen on the Big Sur coast in California.
Swami came.
Swami came. He came in. For several visits, whenever I got to India, I'd always ask Swami, when you come to America, will you come and bless my place? And I really meant Esalen Institute. I loved being there, and then I was, and he said, yes, I will come. And so one time I was there in India on birthday time, and Swami said, I came to your place, where were you? Where were you? And I didn't know what he was talking about. When I got back, it turns out that Baba had shown up on the deck outside. The guys from the staff of Esalen had gathered for a bhajan while I went off to India in my place. And there was a big glass doors and a deck outside, and Swami showed up on the deck, came walking through the glass doors, sat down on the chair that I had in my puja room there where they were meeting, and then went around and touched everybody to see that he was actually a physical person, and then sat back down in the chair and told them to sing, and they sang some bhajan, and then he got up and he blessed everybody, went back out through the glass doors and disappeared. And in India he comes up to me and he says, "Where were they?" But he said, "Very nice bhajan, but not good Sanskrit pronunciation. Tell them to sing English, but good tala."
So
It had a
he
good
showed
beat.
up while you were absent, just to again pull your leg and let you know.
Well, just to show that he is
Yeah.
not limited by time or space. Of course not. None of us are, but we
Al?
choose to be.
We're out of time. These are great stories. Thank you for sharing them and for condensing them and expanding them, because both ways are wonderful, because the detail, the nuances, the raised eyebrows of Sri Sathya Sai Baba, metaphorically speaking, add to this hugely. We are in your debt.
Well, anyway, it was a great joy.